This is the Transcend in Life podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson, taking you from fear to freedom.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Transcend in Life. I'm really excited. This guy has been busy. I will just say that. Mike Acker is an executive and communication coach, a keynote speaker, and the author of 4 books, including the best-selling Speak with No Fear, which has appeared on numerous book lists, even getting designated as the #1 book on overcoming fear of speaking on Forbes.com. Brother, not many people can say that. That's pretty amazing. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to talking. I like that we have some West Coast and then Southeast roots as well.
Yeah, man, you're coming to us live from the great state of Alabama, so appreciate having you on. I got to go right to the book, and I would want to hear your journey and your story. But obviously, the fear of public speaking, some people are literally, that is a greater fear than dying to some. So this is really unique that you chose that book title. How did you decide to do that? I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kept on working with these communication clients, and they're working on just overall communication confidence. But over and over and over again, people would say, I just get nervous. I'm just afraid. And we're talking about top level executives. We're talking about CEOs of some companies that would be known. And yet they keep on saying, I'm afraid to communicate, or I put it off, or I try to get away from it. One person even said, in Zoom meetings, I pretended that I've lost connection simply because my nerves got the better end of me. So here I am talking with one of my clients. We're walking through this, and she had written a book, and it had gotten incredible traction. So we're talking, and she challenged me to write a book. And so I thought, what would be the one thing that I could just do that would help people? Well, I'd walked through so many people through how to get over this, or begin to get over this, or to ease some of their nervousness. So I put that down in a book, some of my thoughts, some of my stories. Really, there's a lot of anecdotes because I want people to relate to me and my own journey. And then there's almost a motivational speaking. I know that you do a lot of speaking as well. So from that motivational aspect, there's this, hey, I get you, and I can help you with some actionable steps that you can take. And then I thought, I don't want to go speak without fear. I want to say speak with no fear. Now it's a little bit misleading, because I actually don't want people to speak with no fear. I want people to speak with a tiny bit of intrepidation, a tiny bit of nervousness, because that nervousness that you feel when you speak translates to energy, so you're not a monotonous speaker. But speak with no fear sounds a lot better than speak without fear. And ultimately, you shouldn't have anything that holds you back from pursuing the dream that you have. And that's the idea there. How do you speak with that type of confidence?
Yeah, I love it, man. And I guess it sounds better than speak with just a little bit of fear. So the title absolutely makes sense. You say actionable steps, and obviously there's going to be a lot that you unpack in that book, but what is one of the big things? If somebody's sitting here listening going, I have that fear. I am that guy that's like, oh, sorry, unstable connection. You can't hear me.
Yeah.
What's one takeaway that you could give them to say, you know what, if you would just try this, it might go so much better for you, or you might have less fear?
The $350 piece of advice is simply this: learn how to pause. Learn how to pause. I mean, I listen to people again and again throughout the day. Just was getting off a client call a little while ago, was working with several others. I do workshops with people. So again and again, I'm hearing this, and people don't pause. And the reason they don't pause is because they're nervous, or they're insecure. They think that if they pause, they'll lose the traction, they'll lose their train of thought, they'll lose the attention of the audience. So they have to keep on talking. And if they feel like it's not going well, they start rushing. So they pause even less. And people stream together all these sentences. And then they wonder why they ramble, because they haven't given thought to where they're going. And when they don't pause, they don't breathe. When they don't pause, they don't smile. When they don't pause, they don't think. So if you pause, it brings in so much more ability for you to gather your thoughts, for you to catch what you're saying. It will eliminate your ums and ahs and ers, which then when you say those, that makes you more nervous. So if you pause, it will bring about a huge amount of confidence and reduce your insecurity. Most people are a little bit unsure of themselves when they hear that. Oh, Mike, if I pause, I just don't know what to say. But if you go back and listen to this podcast again, you'll hear that I paused multiple times in just saying that. Now, when you think about it, it might not sound as fluid as you might like, but the first time you heard it, it came across fine. And it allows you to think through what I'm saying. Pauses, here's what pauses do. Pauses create a vacuum that's filled with the attention of the audience or filled with the unnatural uhs and fillers that distract and take away from what you're trying to say. Create a pause, people lean in, you breathe, and you continue.
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, it makes a ton of sense because you're right. There might be some pauses, but I literally am listening to you, trying to make sure I don't cut you off. That's a big part of, podcasting is like, I don't want to cut off my guest. It doesn't do that. You're not pausing for like, oh, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. You just deliberate is kind of how it seems to me, which is amazing. So you brought up wanting people to relate to you, and I want to hear that story. How did you become such a polished speaker? What is your story, man? How did you get to this amazing ability? Because it truly is a skill. Speaking is a skill, and you clearly have refined it.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that helps me when I'm coaching people is I did not come out of the womb with a polished speaking. And so often we learn from someone who's already amazing at what they do. They're just natural at it. One of the things I think why Michael Jordan is so relatable is because people know his journey of how he got to where he's at. He got rejected from teams initially. Likewise for me, I was born and I had a speech impediment. So I couldn't say the word j or the sound j. I couldn't differentiate between soldier and shoulder. There was other sounds that I just could not get. So in kindergarten and first grade, I went through speech therapy and had to learn. Well, when you speak in front of people and your words don't come out right and they sound funny, people laugh at you. So my mom worked with me, and I was very interested in working on getting better. My mom said that I was very, very adamant about this issue. And I wish that everybody would have that mindset with communication. People often put communication on the back burner until a big, huge issue happens. It's like John Maxwell talks about his weight in his life. He's a leadership coach and a speaker and author. He talks about how for years he was overweight, but he just didn't really care about it until finally the doctor said, "You will die this year if you don't do something about it." And he said, "I will." And the doctor said, "No, you won't. I'll see you in here in 6 months." And he said, "No, I will." And then he started working on it. A lot of people treat communication like that issue right there. You know what? I'll deal with it when I deal with it. And I wish a lot of people would, instead of like the John Maxwell story, waiting until they're 60 years old, that they would do it when they're 6 years old, and they would work on it and work on it and work on it. So that's what I did. And then after I got comfortable and confident speaking in front of my classroom as a elementary age student and spoke in front of some different groups with lots of work and some trepidation, I moved to Mexico. So I moved to Mexico when I was 10 years old, and I was blonde haired, blue eyed, as pale as could be. Go there. I'm tall. I'm awkward. I have these buck teeth that stick out like straight forward. I mean, horse teeth. We go down to Mexico, and my parents put me into an inner city public school in a large metropolitan area of Mazatlan, Mexico. JM, that was some interesting times. You put me in front of the class to present something. My Spanish was awful, and I was so different looking. This is before there was as much tourism as there is now in Mazatlan. And so people had literally never seen in person an American. And here I was in my blonde glory, just absolutely standing out with my limbs going everywhere. So anytime I opened my mouth, people laughed. So all that confidence I learned was eroded. And then I had to learn, once again, how to speak. I had to learn my speaker identity. I had to learn how to go with it. I had to learn how to not be thrown off. I had to learn how to stand in front of people, and people are laughing and smirking because I got dubbed the class clown, not because I wanted to, but that's just how it was. And then I had to learn how to do that. And by the end of my high school time there, I was so enculturated and so finally comfortable that I enrolled in law school to go straight to law school. That's how you do it in Mexico. And that was my plan. But instead, I moved to the United States. And now I was in another environment and had to relearn how to speak in front of people. And in my book, I tell the story about where I got up in front of the entire school, entire college that I was going to, a small college, a couple thousand people. And I had an important issue that I wanted to communicate about. It was something about social justice, something that people would rally. I just knew that people had to hear what I had to say. And so I get up there and I'm feeling it. And I've been in front of some people before, and I felt like I could do this. And I get up in front of it, and I see the people looking back at me. And I remember the room kind of dimming in on me, going dark around me, the space kind of closing. I remember that people's attention just seemed like they didn't care what I had to say. I was reading that into it. I'm sure no one felt that way in that moment. And so I started rushing, and then I tripped and I didn't say it. I remember the president eventually coming over to me, putting his hand on my shoulder, kind of steering the talk to an end, and then walking it off. But you asked, what did I do to get to the spot where I got? One of the things is I didn't give up, and I didn't get out. I like what Mark Twain says, right? Courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery thereof. And you talk about transcending in life. You will not transcend if you let fear hold you back from your goals and from your dreams. So I kept on going. I went to debate. I learned, I worked on it. My debate coach gave me some incredible advice. He's one of the top 20 influential people in my life just because of what he taught me during that time. And I acted on it. So those are some of the ways that I did it.
You said so much there. There's so many questions I have right now. So, A, when you talk about communication, it is so interesting because quite literally our whole world revolves around communication.
Right.
Or the idea that it's taken place, or the frustration that this person didn't hear what I'm saying. It is interesting that people don't choose to really work on it until there's a major problem. And we say, gosh, we're having a problem with communication. How in the world do we solve this, brother? Because everybody, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you are the best speaker in the world. It is constant work. You have to work on it, correct?
Right, absolutely. I think the best time to work on your life is when life is going well. And the best time to work on your communication is when you actually don't have an event to speak at. I wish that more students in college and high school invested themselves into this type of training, these type of classes, even if they didn't think that they're ever going to do something with it. So many of the people that I work with are engineers or are in tech, are in finances, are in science, and they never took that optional class on communications. They took another one, social studies instead. So here they are forward in their career, going up through the different ladder and the different ladders that they're in, the different ranks they're breaking through, and they realize that their ability to do the thing that they need to do, well, that's recognized. They got that down. They just don't have the ability to communicate. And leadership is communication. So I just launched a YouTube channel. And my very first video is just talking about how leadership is communication and communication is leadership. And how you got to invest in both of these together. So how do you do this? Is you got to figure out some way to make it a regular part of your day. Just like brushing your teeth. There's things that you can do in the mirror to get better. You can read a book. You can record yourself and read a book out loud. You can record yourself and watch it back. You can do these small things. Like you might not be able to go to a physical gym to work out and use a barbell, but you can do push-ups at home. Similarly, there are things that you can do every single day to work on your communication. Routinely, when I work with a client, Afterwards, I'll give them very targeted, specific things that that person can do to achieve their goal. Well, without it being targeted to our audience here today, what if you took a book, you looked at yourself in the mirror, and you read the book as if you were speaking it? That practice, even if you do it for 1 minute a day, 1 page a day, not only will you benefit from reading the book, but also you will benefit from speaking it out loud.
Yeah, man, it's really tangible and practical advice. I love that. Gosh, I had a question and it's eluding me. So I'm going to go to the other one that I had. Mazatlan, where did this come from? And you got to talk to me about fear, because clearly fear is part of your title of your book, but you have an ability to overcome it, or you have a process to overcome fear. So first, where's Mazatlan come into play? And then second, what is your process for overcoming fear?
Yeah, JM, how much time we got? Because Mazatlan has a backstory that has a backstory. So
I mean, I scheduled us for about 45 minutes, brother, but look, if it's a great story, I'm in, man. I never cut that off.
Yeah. So I do a keynote speech, and I'll give just a sample of it right here. I do this talk in different places where I'm talking about decision and goal making and such. And the way that I start this is, people introduce me, I walk up on stage and I say, my dad was a drug dealer. My mom was a witch, and I became a pastor. And just in that moment, people are looking at me like, really? Come on, are you serious? And you know, what kind of drug dealer? Well, the statute of limitations is up, and these aren't his words, they're mine. But he had several planes and several boats and a team, and he would cut out the middleman by flying directly down to South America, down to Central America, and he would buy the drugs and he'd fly it back and sell it. So my dad was an entrepreneur. Sometimes I joke that he was a pharmaceutical entrepreneur. He was a drug dealer. Then from there, he met my wife or my mom, and they traveled around and they started this coffee company, and they were doing things. They're kind of going legal, raising a family, having my sister and I. And then they had this radical transformation. They went from people who had nothing to do and made fun of religion to having a very, very real, genuine experience with Christianity, with Jesus. So they went independently of each other. They became Christians, but not political Christians, not couch Christians, not just Sunday only Christians. They became the type of Christians that did the words of Jesus, taking care of the poor, taking care of those who were in jail, taking care of people. They got very involved. It wasn't a voting issue. It was, how can we genuinely love people and give grace to people? So we started going down to Mexico to take care of people. We started going to the streets in downtown Seattle, doing soup kitchens. My mom would take us to the nursing homes. We were involved in some AIDS ministry before that was hip and cool and trendy, before that was something you could actually do. While a lot of other people were saying that those people deserve it, we were doing something about it too, to help people. So my parents modeled that for me. And part of that was my dad coming home, and he had transitioned into law practice at that point in time, because he had a law degree this entire time. And he comes home and says, we're moving out of Mexico. So we uprooted our family, we rented out our house, and we moved to Mexico. And there we got involved. I remember my mom bringing kids home with lice, like bringing them to my bedroom. And we rented this house. It was this 5-bedroom house for $500. How do you like that? 3 blocks away from the beach. And my mom would go out to an hour away from the city, maybe 45 minutes out of the city. And she would bring these kids who lived in tar paper shacks. She would load up the car, bring them home, and do lice treatment in our house, while their parents were doing who knows what. And a lot of them didn't have dads. And she would bring them home and take care of them, and then bring them back, feed them. And I got to see that. I got to see my dad do so much of that work. We did a whole bunch of prison work down there and a whole bunch of other work down there. So all of that gave me this incredible perspective of, well, one, how fortunate we are here in the United States, and two, how meaningful it is to get out of your own mind, your own needs, your own greeds, and see it for someone else. One of the strategies I talk about to overcome fear is a great strategy for life. It's not about you. So much of the fear that we get for anything is when we think about how it affects us. I mean, so much of the pandemic fear that people experience even there is, how does this affect me? When is it going to hit me? You're not afraid. A lot of people who are not afraid, they don't see how it affects them. But when you start thinking, hey, this is not about me, this is about others, it changes what we do, it changes what we say, it changes how we approach actions. Or if we feel like in the business world, right? If we believe in our product. And I always tell people, I used to be a salesperson, and I always tell people, if you're in sales and you don't believe in the product that you sell, then you got to get out, because you will fear rejection because you don't have anything you believe in. So how do we overcome fear? We believe that we have something to say, or we have something to give, or we have something to provide, or we have something of value for someone else. And we don't make it about ourselves. We make it about making sure I get my point, my value, my food, whatever it is, to someone else.
Well, man, so my dad was a drug dealer. My mom was a witch. I ended up a pastor. That's incredible.
Yeah.
But I got to go right to the pastor, because what you just said, you talked about bringing value and really, that's passion. Is that why pastors, because some of the greatest speakers I've ever seen are pastors. And I know they do practice a lot, obviously, not just when they're doing their sermons, they're practicing prior, but they're also clearly passionate. Is that part of the key?
Yeah. So I have a course, and I walk people through confidence communication. Then I have a second book called Right to Speak. And in both of those, I say you have to have a what. You have to have a what and a why. Why am I doing this? And what do I want to say? Well, that why question is so valuable because it convinces us that what we're saying is important. And if the why is just about production, it's not going to translate very well into confidence. But if my why is, I'm giving this report because my team needs to know where we are so it can give them steps of what to do next. That's a pretty valuable why. Now, this report is not just because I have to, because it's Tuesday and this is the day I give a report. Now my why is, I'm helping Sarah and Jane and Prabhu and Carlos, and I'm helping people. I'm helping people on my team. I'm helping their quality of life. And so much of that is what, and that's what pastors have, right? They have a why. They're saying this is of eternal importance. In any clergy, this is of eternal importance. They need to know this. This is why politicians that have learned the skill of speaking can be incredible public speakers. This is why Ronald Reagan on the Republican side of things, or Obama on the Democrat side of things, have been hailed as great communicators. Not only did they have the skill side of things, but they also had the conviction side. They had a why. I'm doing this because I believe in my message. I believe in the why of what I'm having to say. So if you go into a team meeting and you have this why, my team needs to be pumped up. That's going to help you out. Sports coaches, they're able to passionately get behind what they're saying because why? The team needs to hear from me. So I'm able to give that to them. So absolutely, it comes back to pastors, politicians. It comes to anybody who really comes to moms and dads. Why do they so confidently tell their kid to get out of the road? Because they have a reason, they have a why. And it's a little bit harder to find sometimes in corporate America and business world and entrepreneurship. But if you can tie it back to something that matters for people, your confidence will increase and your nervousness will go down.
One of the things that you do well, especially I think this is applicable today in the Zoom environment, is we have these, it's amazing. Zoom, trust me, it's an incredible platform that we didn't really take advantage of prior to the pandemic. So positive, but the challenge is really connecting with another human being through this screen. Now you tend to go to your heart, right? Which I'm a huge fan of because I feel like I connect with you that much more. What are some other tips you can give people to use in this Zoom world to really communicate effectively?
Yeah. Yeah. Not to sound like a broken record, but I teach all these in my courses, right? And I walk through people specifically for it. And so I love to dialogue with anybody about something like that. I also put a video about that on my YouTube channel, and I will give you that right here, and this will help you. So JM, imagine you and I are walking down, or audience members, you're listening to this right now, driving your car. Imagine you and I are driving down the road together, walking down the road together. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, bam, a huge brick wall lands between us. Now, first of all, we'd be thinking about where did that come from and what is that about? But put that aside. Put aside the brick wall question. If you and I still wanted to talk on the other side of the brick wall, what would we do? We would talk louder, and we would work harder, and we would enunciate better. We would lean in and not away. The computer working virtually is a brick wall. But instead of doing what I just told you people do, people lean away. They lean away from their computer. They lean back into their chair. They look away. They talk less clear. They have less energy. They have less of all of those. Is it any wonder that we're losing interest, we're disengaging, that people are multitasking? Obstacles are opportunities if we put more energy into them. And this whole virtual learning is a great opportunity, as you said, but we have to treat it like that. We have to lean into it. We have to set ourselves up for success. So I stand up when I'm talking to people on these Zoom meetings. I position the camera at a certain spot. I have the camera at eye level, and I work hard at it, even as I would if there was a wall between us. Sometimes that makes us a little bit more tired, but there's rhythms that you can do to break in the middle of the day as well.
Well, and we will absolutely put in the show notes the YouTube and any of the applicable things that you're doing, because I want people to see this, because I can see them on screen, guys. It's working, right? It's really fun to communicate with them. I got to just change for a moment, because one of the things I read is you described it's not about us. I have a very similar saying, so I'm excited to hear your take on this specific to speaking. And you also talked about leadership before. What does that mean, and how is that applicable in those arenas?
Yeah. Well, let's go to leadership and communication. What is the goal of leadership? The goal of leadership is to direct, guide, coach, propel, empower people to get something done. Now, what's the goal of communication? To speak, to influence, to direct verbally a group of people to get something done. Ultimately, the end result of both is so similar, and you could see that in so many different ways. I could draw parallels. So leadership and communication go hand in hand. That's why I wrote a book called Speak with No Fear. But then later on, I wrote a book called Lead with No Fear. And there's those barriers that get in the way that cause us to pull back instead of going forward. So many of the principles, in fact, I just did a YouTube video about this a couple weeks ago, where I talked about how some of the classic leadership principles can be directly related over to speaking, and some of the classic speaking principles can be directly related over to leadership. So they go hand in hand, these two, that you shouldn't really separate. Warren Buffett, a great leader in the financial area. We talk a lot about his wealth, but he also led a lot of people to build up his empire that produced the wealth. It wasn't just him. He led very, very well. And what did Warren Buffett say? He said that the best thing he ever did was invest in his communication. When he got done with college, he went to Dale Carnegie, paid the equivalent of about $900 today, $100 then, in communication. So he understood the connection. Now, it's not about you, it's really about both of these. There's so many memes out there, right? Where there's this one where the boss is being carried by some people and he's directing people. And then there's the correct one. The leader is ahead of people saying, come on up. So there's some memes about that. But ultimately, a leader is not someone who is pushing people and forcing people. It's someone who's influencing people to come with them. So it's not about the leader. And I love there's the whole upside down paradigm of the triangle that a lot of different companies say, that instead of the leader being at the top of the triangle, the leader is actually at the bottom. It's actually the base. So if in leadership, it's not about you, means that you're propelling the people you work for forward. In communication, it's the same. When I go up in front of people, even right now as I speak, it's not me trying to say, Mike, how can you sound cool? How can people be impressed by you? If you walk away going, man, that guy's a great speaker, cool, then I've failed. In fact, I'd rather you go, that guy's an okay speaker, but I learned something. I'd much rather that. So even in my YouTube videos, I don't cut flubs out. I allow myself to make those mistakes. If they come up, I don't try to make them up. I don't do things perfectly, because that's my goal is not to impress people. My goal is to impact people. It's not about me. And if you go in front going, man, I hope people like me. I hope people are engaged with me. I hope people, what will they think? I bet they see that I'm nervous. I bet they see what I'm doing right now. Can they see my sweat? Can you notice how much that whole conversation is about me and I and me and I? In my book, Speak With No Fear, there's one paragraph where I put in the mind of a person what they might be saying when they get up in front. And then afterwards, I put that paragraph again with all the bolded personal pronouns of me and I. And it's amazing to see how easily me and I can show up. But if we turn it around and go, okay, I may or may not be the best speaker, but I have some core thoughts that are incredibly valuable to people. And I'm going to work so hard to get those across. Then if people walk away and say, Mike, you're amazing, I was like, cool, thank you. But what helped you? That's very nice that you said that, but did it help you? And so that's really the value of it's not about me.
That makes a ton of sense, man. We talk about this openly where I'm like, man, that speaker is incredible. And then you go, what did I get from it? No, they just sounded great, but the content was lacking, or the delivery was so flawless, like it didn't stick. That's why when people hit you with something, it's like, oh, having a communication expert on here, I got to ask, just because there's more than two sides, but in communication, you use your nonverbals extremely well. You derive energy from it, in my opinion. Is that something that you can, and again, if I'm taking from the book, brother, I apologize, I haven't read it yet.
No, you're good.
But is that something that you teach as well as part of your nonverbals to really act with purpose and really driving home points?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my course, I walk people through confidence and communication, and I end with skills. All of these external things that we do, the way that we use our hands, the way we look with our eyes, the way that we go up and down with our voice, the way that we go faster so that we can get our point across and sound like we're urgent and go slower. I actually do a really fun workshop. I'm doing it for a couple of large companies here coming up. Really fun. It's called 10 Speaking Skills in 60 Minutes. So I work on everything you're talking about, the way that you posture, the way that you hold your shoulder, the way that you dress, the way that you carry your hair. For example, people with longer hair tends to be, often women have the longer hair than men, but there's many men that I'll work with as well. Some of the celebrities will have some longer hair, but we need to see your jawline. So put your hair back in such a way that we can see your jawline. So even things like that come across in communication. There's so much. And the reality is there's so much stuff that comes across with communication that it could be too much to think about. So what do? Years ago, I started taking some golf lessons, and I went with the instructor, and he told me so many things. You got to have your feet like this and your shoulders like this, put your hips like this. Okay, your front foot needs to be here. Your back foot needs to be here, the ball. And I'm thinking, I said, how do I remember all of this? And he laughed and he said, you won't. Just pick one. With communication, there's so many different things, and I'll drop one tick and I'll pick up another one. So it's not that you have to work on every single thing, you work on one. So when it comes to coming across with your presentation skills, like you asked, maybe it's just you're working your eye contact or not waving your hands around or holding them in front of yourself all the time or doing all these different things that could come across. Find 1, 2, 3 things that you can do and intentionally work on that.
Makes a ton of sense. My next question would be on the receiving end as a listener, because again, communication, goes both ways, right? Where you're speaking and then you're receiving. What's one thing people could do better to really improve on that side of things, to really get the hearing people and listening and really soaking it in so that when they do respond, it's applicable and it's not just, I'm waiting for you to be quiet so I can speak.
Right. Not all points are created equal. And not all points hit people the same. It's why some people have said it to my book, this is life-changing, and other people have said it's worthless. Because we all process things differently. So for when you are listening to me, to someone else, don't try to memorize it all. Don't try to remember it all. Don't try to transcribe it all. Write down 1, 2, or 3 things that stand out. And then once you max out your 3 points, just be there in the moment and listen. One of my favorite experiences is I was moderating this group and everybody's talking. And as they're having this discussion, the CEO's quiet the entire time. He was just listening. Well, there's this one point of dialogue that came up. And then the conversation continued, moved to different points, maybe 20, 30 minutes passed by. And then the CEO paused and said, I have a question about, and it was something that has been said 20 to 30 minutes ago. And it was well thought out. In fact, I asked him about this. He essentially zoned out the rest of the time. And you can't always do that, but it was this kind of creative dialogue. And his mind just kept on mulling over this one point that stood out to him. Well, because he captured it in that moment and he thought about it and put it around his mind over and over again, he was able to bring about a great discussion. I had a similar situation one time. I was speaking, and as I was speaking, this is back when I was a pastor. I became a pastor at a very young age, senior pastor of a church. And I was talking, and this teenager comes up to me and said, she said, thank you. Now I was a pastor of a small church at that time. It was like 100 people or so. And she came up and she said, thank you. I said, why are you saying thank you? And she said, because when you said this, well, the reality is that I actually only said something similar to that, but something grabbed a hold of her mind. And she was in a spot where she was mad at life and mad at faith and just mad because she had gotten several concussions and wasn't going to be able to fulfill her dream in hockey. And she was just mad. But something I said, something similar landed in her mind and she replayed it. So I said, oh, that's so nice. And I didn't get it at the time. I didn't understand what I'm saying, this principle. I said, anything else stood out to you? And she said, honestly, I don't really remember what else you said. But this one thought. So was I successful that day? Yes. Yes. When it comes to listening, you don't have to remember everything. Grab a hold of 1, 2, 3 things and act on those instead of trying to take it all in. I always tell people this, that true depth in life is not knowing a whole bunch or doing a whole bunch. It's knowing some things very well and doing those few things very well.
Makes so much sense, man. I mean, even when I think of reading a book, it's like I'm looking for 2 to 3 main things. I'm going to read all 400 pages and I'll love it, but I'm going to walk away with that 1 or 2 things. What should I have asked you that I didn't know enough to ask, Mike, that you're like, man, you should have asked this. I got to tell your audience this.
Yeah. Well, I think there's the growing up in Mexico. One of the interesting aspects is how did that affect my communication and leadership? And what I'd say on that is when you can and when you are able to get in the shoes of someone else, it affects the way you speak and it affects the way you lead. I was heavily impacted by somebody, and I don't care what side of the political spectrum people are on, and I'm not getting into that, but someone was very hurt that Hillary did not win and that Trump did. But instead of just going on social media like so many people did and blasting the other party, like we see people do all the time, this reporter, instead of doing that, this I don't know, magazine writer, traveled to 3 places that ardently supported Trump instead of Hillary. And instead of coming in there and leading with their assumptions, she led with a desire to understand. And she said, why did you vote this way? And these weren't people who just pulled the party line. These were people who had a clear reason for why they voted it. They didn't vote that way because they always voted that way. They chose that. And she understood them. She listened to them. She may or may not agreed with them afterwards. In fact, she still didn't change who she would have voted for, but she understood them. So no longer was she going to say, well, those people are just stupid. So often what we can do just to bring peace and unity right now in our country is to walk in the other person's shoes and really understand them, maybe not agree with them, but to understand them. So growing up in Mexico, it was hard for me at first, and I didn't like being there for the first several years, but I got to a spot where I was more culturally Mexican than I was American. And I understood what it was like. I understood some of the different uniquenesses of growing up in that culture and in that poverty and in that area. And I was able to see from their point of view. Likewise, when Black Lives Matter came out years ago, I was one of the people, not this last time, but I was one of the people who said, that's stupid, all lives matter. And then I took my own advice, and we had several African-American friends. And I just asked, can you just tell me your story? Can you just help me understand? Because to me, it just sounds like dumb. And to someone listening, I know that's such a contentious issue. And so you could jump for the contention, but please hear my heart on that. It's not that I got political or got aggressive or got on this campaign. I think we can make things about a bigger issue than really the heart of it. It's about understanding the human on the other side. And sometimes, unfortunately, Twitter does not allow humans to be understood. So it's not a great platform. So you'll rarely ever see me post something like that here. But instead, has this ever happened to you? Have you ever felt this? And to hear stories from people, whatever the case might be. And I think if in the United States, I know that if in the United States, we took more time to listen instead of just to shout out, we would be far better in a place of unity, and we still would have differences. They would not go away. We'd still say, no, I don't like the BLM movement, or I think it's the best movement ever, or I like Trump, or I like Hillary, or I like Biden, whatever it might be. There's still going to be those. But at least we're not saying you're a stupid idiot. I can't believe you voted or do that or believe in that.
Man, I literally wrote my most recent blog that just went out was seeking to understand. I have this section on it. And when you're saying that, I'm like, oh, brother, I so support what you're saying. I love it. And I agree with you. There's so many interesting things. It doesn't mean you agree, but you learn so many interesting things by just asking some questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll get your book and learn more about you, brother, because I love what you're doing. I think it's amazing. I think more people need to.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I have a couple out there. So I have Speak With No Fear is the one that's got about 400 mostly positive ratings on Amazon. Some people, it's not for them. Some people didn't hear any points that landed and other people did. So for the listeners out there, hopefully it's for you. That would be encouragement to you. That was my first one, Speak With No Fear. Then I wrote a book on how to actually write presentations, and that's called Write to Speak. Very simple. The idea is a simple, repeatable system that you can use again and again. So when I come up and I'm preparing a talk for my YouTube or a keynote, what am I doing? I'm doing that simple, repeatable system. And it's so ingrained in what I do, I don't have to think about it. And it reduces stress. It's like Steve Jobs wearing the black turtleneck every day. Just do it so it doesn't take time. You want that simple, repeatable system. Then I wrote a book called grow your soul. So I'm not a pastor anymore. And that was a choice that my wife and I made to step away from that. And a little bit of that decision is in there. But ultimately, it's just this, how can I grow? And then the last one that I wrote as a kind of a pandemic project with another friend of mine is called Lead with No Fear. And we talk about shifting away, that getting to a place of inspiration, clarity, and confidence is not this dramatic thing. You don't go, I'm going to do it. I'm going to become a whatever it is. I'm going to build. No, it's a small shift. And it's a small shift that you do. And if you do that daily, that small 3-degree shift, tiny shift, will take you in a radically different position. On a piece of paper, if I draw a triangle and I do a 3-degree shift, you'll barely be able to see the difference between the lines. They'll look like they're almost one line. But you carry those out and you put them on page after page after page, they're going to end up in completely different miles apart. That's the power of a small shift.
That's awesome, man. I love what you're doing. Keep up the amazing work. Keep influencing and changing people's lives, man. You're inspiring people to be better at communication and leadership, which is so important. I just appreciate your time, man. It was really interesting, and I had a great time. I learned a lot. I'm sure the audience did too. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. JM, thank you so much. Love what you're doing with transcending in life, and transcend in life by improving your communication and leadership. Love it. Thanks for having me on the show.
Truly our pleasure, man. I really appreciate it. All right, you guys, make sure to check it out. I will put all of his stuff in the show notes. I think Mike is doing some amazing work. Do check that out. Also, I did just write literally a blog on what he was talking about, seeking to understand. I think you'll get a ton out of it. Go to letsgowin.com and check that out. Until next time, continue to transcend in life. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to transcendinlifepodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Transcend in Life podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson, taking you from fear to freedom.